Remember when we had Pops' gloves and Pops wanted to stay in Washington?
And then move the ball forward. So when she was on the show this week, I asked her if she'd had those conversations yet.
Getting an appointment with the speaker is not a simple process, but we have had conversations in his office with his office staff, and I hope that we'll be able to do that in the next several weeks.
I find that interesting, that the mayor of the economic engine of the state can't get on the House Speaker's calendar, but they did have...
I'm just wincing, Mike, as you're playing that clip. I mean, between what the mayor said and what Speaker Moore said when he was here, and don't forget, Senator Phil Berger said we would have to look very closely at the prospect of...
Joey?
Yeah,
51 or the highway?
51.
Very long shot, I guess, would be the euphemistic way of putting it.
Yeah, and I also...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the language that they approved, to me, looks like kind of boilerplate language where they're, going to continue working to find a solution. I didn't see anything that really firmly says we're going to go and get it this legislative session. I will personally be very surprised if they actually move to get it on the referendum, get a referendum on the ballot, especially because if they are pushing for 4-year terms and those changes, that could be really unpopular. You really want to put your prize transit sales tax ballot on that same referendum, on that same ballot with something that might get a big campaign to oppose it? That seems like an iffy tactic.
And, of course, the clock is ticking on this because federal infrastructure money is being divvied out to places all over the country. And there may not be that much left by the time we get around to it. Now, is there any way to fast track this? Anything that we could do to fast track this for the legislature?
Just to throw one other thing in there, Mike, before you even worry about the legislature, based on what I saw at the city retreat last month, let's say they have not reached consensus, I guess would be the nicest way to put it. So there is always a way to fast track things, but when the speaker is not taking the calls of the mayor quickly, it does not look like a priority at the moment. So
and she did say on the program that they're still talking to the railroad about the red line, the railroad being Norfolk Southern, because people in the northern part of the county have said they're not going to vote yes on this unless they get rail out of this, because they got nothing out of the previous project. And I think Norfolk Southern has its hands full right now in Ohio. So we'll see what happens there. In January, planners at Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools listed 40 construction projects to be put on the ballot this November at a cost of just under $2.9 billion. That would make it the largest bond referendum of its kind in state history. But this week, Interim Superintendent Crystal Hill advised the CMS board to drop 10 of the 40 projects on that wish list. But even then, the cost is likely to be more than the initial $2.9 billion.
These projects have an estimated value of $2.99 billion. This amount is escalated, which means it does include inflation.
So is that why the price tag is going up on less? We're paying more for less, Ann?
It is, yeah. In Monday's newsletter, I said the big question was going to be whether they'd stick with the $3 billion request or scale it back, and it turns out the answer is yes. They're doing both. They've had to scale it back because this is sort of part of the process. I was kind of confused about why they hadn't done this earlier, but apparently the county does all the escalation to make sure that it's consistent. So the county took the CMS numbers and ran it through, and some of those projects jumped by a lot, 10% or more. And so they said, well, we're going to keep it. It's kind of like the gas prices. It's $2.997 billion, not quite $3 billion, but it's 30 projects. They dropped, I think, 8 replacement schools for elementary schools and 2 for middle schools. They've still got a lot of replacement projects. They've got 3 full-size middle schools, a small high school uptown, and I think this one's going to be a little controversial, a regional athletic facility, because there's always that question of balancing classrooms versus athletics.
So Crystal Hill, who's the interim superintendent, made that recommendation. You're telling me that the school board took her up on that?
No, they will decide on the 28th. They'll vote on that, and then of course the commissioners who may or may not say, sure, let's put that puppy on the ballot.
Okay, well, answer me this. School enrollment has stagnated or dropped in recent years. We have nothing like the rampant growth that we experienced in the 90s and even the early 2000s. Why are new schools needed?
Well, growth is not consistent in different parts of the county, and they're projecting that there will be, continued growth. But yeah, and this project is much less heavy on new schools, although many of the replacements also include expansions. So, everything is a bit of a guess. The enrollment projections, the inflation projections, but they are assuring people that many of the schools are already at or above capacity, and we need more classrooms.
Construction consultant Dennis Lacaria says the replacements not only improve safety and learning conditions, but prepare for possible future enrollment growth.
Those schools are going to be newer facilities and therefore also typically larger than the facilities that they're going to replace, so we will pick up capacity while addressing conditions.
And School Board Chair Elise Dashew says the board would like more time to consider a plan presented last month that included changes to magnet programs and boundaries, among other things. Shamaria, are those things tied in any way to this bond issue, or is that just a separate thing they were talking about?
Actually, you might want to ask Ann. I don't think they're tied together when they were talking about those two things differently. But they're, magnets are part of those things where when you think about expansion stools and things that are going to be on that bond referendum, magnet programs can be impacted.
Yeah, they've been calling it a comprehensive review and lumping it all together. And what they did was carve off the magnet changes that are specifically tied to building renovations in the bond project. And they're moving ahead with that. And the rest of them, which every change gets people worked up. The rest of them they're going to take a little more time with.
This bond package is $30 million, give or take a penny or two. That's the largest in state history. So
$33 billion.
Excuse me, billion. Thank you very much. It's hard for me to wrap my head around a number that big. It's just slightly more than I think. Where is the lottery in all of this? Why do we need all this money? We got this gangbuster lottery though.
I know, and that's really one of the challenges with the lottery is you see the ads and you hear about the big totals and you think they must be rolling in money. And CMS actually addressed that when they rolled this out and said, yeah, we do. I mean, the last annual report said that CMS got 11.
Hello? Hey.
You get my text?
No, I'm driving right now. I can't get a text.
Well, I got in about started after 7. My phone died in the car. I thought it was charging, but that charger doesn't work.
Oh.
Works for me.
Why didn't it work for us?
I don't know. Sometimes it hits and misses.
You know why?
Why?
Because chargers are like that. They'll work fine up until the time that they won't.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad you got in okay.
What way did you go, Mommy?
What?
Shit, Joe, I think I forgot that damn card. Should I go back and get it?
What way did you go, Mommy?
Joe?
Oh, hold on.
I'm talking to you. Sister, we gotta go.
Sexual content.
Yeah, you should go back and get it.
Yeah, so a lot of us started our day yesterday with some very graphic imagery. Graphic in terms of, it's literally a graphic novel called Let's Talk About It, The Teen's Guide to Sex, Relationships, and Being a Human. And graphic in terms of, it includes really explicit illustrated directions for giving yourself and others sexual pleasure. And it's, these are images that you would not expect to find in a school library. So Brooke Weiss, the president of the Mecklenburg County chapter of Moms for Liberty, said she saw an article about a challenge to this book in Alaska, so she went on the online school library catalog and looked it up, and lo and behold, there it was at Palisades High School, which opened this year. She said that to the board, the CMS officials, as well as media, and posting on social media, and CMS looked into it and says, yeah, that's not appropriate. So,
on the one hand, this book came into their possession along with 8,500 other books. It was kind of a big package of books that came, but I would think, if the Dewey Decimal System is still in operation anywhere, that they looked at each each book and gave it a number, a catalog number, and in the course of doing that, wouldn't they have seen the content and decided that maybe this book among the 8,500 books is not appropriate?
Well, they say that this bundle, which was for new schools, and apparently that includes West Charlotte, which had a new building and therefore a new library, that these bundles arrived shelf-ready, which means that volunteers could just plop them on the shelf. So what they're saying is that essentially, no, a librarian did not sit down and look at this. And the 8,500, I got to assume it's not 8,500 sex guides. I got to assume the 8,500 is the whole. So it seems like you could, I mean, there was one other that Brooks Weiss turned up, which is Sex Plus, Learning, Loving, and Enjoying Your Body. Big surprise, that also includes some pretty explicit material. I mean, like you say, with the Dewey Decimal System, it seems like you could kind of target those as ones that you might want to take a look at.
Very quickly, is there any pushback at all on removing these books?
Don't know. They just respond. This came out yesterday morning, yesterday evening. They copied me on their response and what they're doing. We shall see.
Okay. Well, she said she wouldn't if he did. Well, he is. And now this video announcement this week. So is Nikki Haley.
Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections. That has to change. It's time for a new generation of leadership. Some people look at America and see vulnerability. The socialist left sees an opportunity to rewrite history. China and Russia are on the march. They all think we can be bullied, kicked around. You should know this about me. I don't put up with bullies. And when you kick back, it hurts them more if you're wearing heels. I'm Nikki Haley. I'm running for president.
Music swell. So she has her high-heeled bully shoes on, but the #1 bully who went unnamed in that video, has he reacted yet to this announcement?
He has. He said that he wished her luck. We know that that was a sincere remark. And then I believe an offshoot of his political arm said, Nikki Haley essentially is only about Nikki Haley. So we begin. And Mike, as you know, there's probably 10 people are going to end up in this field. So we're looking at another big draw when it comes to nominating season.
That video, I edited it down for time. It was well over 3 minutes. But in it, she talked about being born and raised in South Carolina, not black, not white, but Indian. And she used that to defend American history, which she says those on the left see as evil. And then she goes on to talk about God and values, saying we must turn in that direction again, and called Joe Biden's record unsurprisingly abysmal. And then, this week, in front of a crowd of a few thousand at the Charleston Visitors Center, Nikki Haley moved that message forward.
We're ready. Ready to move past the stale ideas and faded names of the past. And we are more than ready for a new generation to lead us into the future.
She's polling at about 1% at last report among Republicans, although the race is young. And Trump is still very much the front runner here and the leader of the party. How surprised should we be, then, that York County Republican Congressman Ralph Norman, who Trump backed in the 2022 midterms, has become the first person to step out and endorse Nikki Haley?
Well, they are longtime political allies, so on the surface, what you say does make it surprising, but when you know their political history and their tight bonds, then it's not that surprising, although he did stand up at that same rally, Mike, and describe Nikki Haley as America's Margaret Thatcher. So that was, an attention-getting remark. The other thing, just generally speaking, Mike, it's interesting that this campaign very much is wrapped up in she is a female, she's a minority, but she doesn't think that should matter. The message is, look, this country will elect on merit, and we don't need to talk about the past and past transgressions. That's an interesting message. We'll see if it resonates.
And she touched on something that I think a lot of people are concerned about, Democrats and Republicans, progressives and conservatives, and that is how old the leadership of this country has become over the years. She says it's time for generational change, saying that it is time to stop, quote, trusting politicians from the 20th century. That seems like yesterday to me. She told the crowd in Charleston, in the America I see, the permanent politicians will finally retire. We will have term limits in Congress and mandatory mental competency tests for politicians over 75 years old. Is that a slap at Biden, at Trump, or both?
Yes, at both. I thought that was interesting. I think there are people that might say they want competency tests for anyone over 18 that's running for elected office. One other thing, though, I want to mention, Mike, is that she, in her video, she's obviously emphasizing the 2015 massacre in Charleston and the healing that she says she was helped, that she was involved with. But what was really interesting is there was no mention of the flag and her involvement in taking down the Confederate flag, which, after saying that it was a hurtful symbol and divisive, she later came back and said that it was a symbol of heritage that had been marred only by the shooter. So that's going to be a big topic, I think, as she runs.
Yeah, well, there's that flip-flop, and there's the I guess you could call it a flip-flop, on the fact that she said she would not run for president if Donald Trump was running for president. Clearly, he is running for president, and so is she.
Can you keep this thing on while you go on?
Bring managerial experience to this race. She was, after all, the governor of the state of South Carolina. She brings international experience. She was America's ambassador to the United Nations. She brings that experience dealing with tragedy at the Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston. She did take down the Confederate flag, which was appreciated by a whole bunch of people, I suppose. How does that add up to her strength as a candidate?
Well, there's another governor, Ron DeSantis of Florida, who is in the number 2 position in most polls. Excuse me, you see now behind former President Trump on the Republican side. So I think if and when he enters, he'll be the governor, and he'll kind of claim the governor managerial experience lane pretty readily. I do think it's going to be interesting to see in the North Carolina governor's race how that starts shaking out and how people start lining up there as different candidates emerge.
Yeah, right now we have the lieutenant governor, who I think is going to run, and Josh Stein, the attorney general, who I think is going to run on the Democratic side. We have to take a break. We'll come back with more of the local news roundup in a moment in Charlotte Talks on WFAE.
Thanks for joining us this Friday evening. You're listening to Charlotte Talks local news roundup here on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org.
Life can sometimes seem like a succession of goals. Graduate from school, get a job, find love. But what if that's not enough?
Purpose is an ancient concept. We, as a species, have been grappling with this concept forever.
How cultivating a sense of purpose can help us weather life's storms. This week on Hidden Brain from NPR.
Tomorrow at 2 p.m. This Sunday evening at 6 p.m., join us, a special program called Expanding Our Origin Story. Clint Smith is the author of How the World is Past, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. He travels to 9 historic sites to understand how slavery is remembered and taught. Also, Gail Jessup White was on a tour at Monticello when revealed she was related to Sally Hemings. It was a moment that changed her life forever. Join us Sunday evening at 6 p.m. on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org.
It's Charlotte Talks at the local news roundup on 90.7 WFAE and WFAE.org. I'm Mike Collins. Eric Spanberg joins us from the Charlotte Business Journal for the local news roundup today. Shamari Morrison from WCNC-TV and from the WFAE newsroom. 2 superstars. And Doss Helms, our education reporter, and senior editor Eli Portillo. Thank you all for being here. Like a car stuck in the always slow traffic on I-77 South, the Charlotte area transportation planners voted Wednesday to study whether it makes sense to partner with a private company to build the toll lanes on Interstate 77 from Uptown to the South Carolina line. Now, I read in the paper this morning that, I think it was the paper this morning, that we are going to have toll lanes in that stretch of highway. That's going to happen. The question is, how are they going to get there? And are they talking about whether it makes sense to partner here with Centra, Eli, or to partner with some other company to build? I thought
Groundhog Day already happened, but we're rehashing all the classic hits here in the city of Charlotte.
Expanded terms, toll lanes, you got it.
So they are going to build toll lanes on that stretch of 77 south of Uptown. They're not going to expand it with general purpose lanes. The question right now is whether to partner with Cintra or have the state Department of Transportation finance the toll lane construction here. What the state is saying is, hey, if you guys decide you want to have us finance it and not go with a private company to build and operate these toll lanes, cool, but you're going to be waiting until the 2040s for them to open. So the question as it's being framed right now is kind of, do you want toll lanes that might cost a lot more but get here a lot faster from the private company, maybe in 10 years? Or do you want toll lanes that would probably cost less for drivers but might take 20 plus years for the state to build? This was not a unanimous vote, and I think all of us who went through I-77 North toll lanes debates in the last decade know that this is a setup for a really contentious local issue.
Yeah, there were several no votes from members of the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization. Representatives from the towns of Matthews, Pineville, Huntersville, Cornelius, Davidson, and Indian Trail voted no. That pretty much sums up it all, I suppose, except for Charlotte. Davidson Mayor Rusty Knox says he didn't want a repeat of the toll project, which is in existence right now north of town.
But how many people would have actually been in favor of it if they knew that they were going to pay $4 to go one exit on 77 North? I mean, I think that was kind of unimaginable.
You know, prior to building those lanes, we and others kept asking the question, yeah, but what is it going to cost? And they would never tell us. Now I think we know the reason why. Is that the reason why, or they just didn't know?
I think you've asked one of those questions, Mike, that you know the answer to already, perhaps. Is that a fair answer?
Yeah. So can revealing the price ahead of schedule help these folks decide on which company to choose to build these? Because you know they're going to opt for a company and not wait till 2040.
Yeah, but I want to go back to Eli's point. For any of us that had the opportunity to cover the past decade of how we got the I-77 mobility lanes, the numbers change all the time in every aspect. What it's going to cost, what the features are going to be, what the rates are going to be that drivers pay. So this is going to be a really slippery topic for people to get their hands around. And as Eli says, this is going to be a fight. This is going to be a debate.
Although there's no speeding between the Moorhead Road exit and Clanton Road on I-77.
I hate when people do that. It's Moorhead Street, dumbass.
Speeding, it is detected in many cases by these radar and LiDAR guns that CMPD has been using. But we found that this week that for years, that equipment has been calibrated by technicians who didn't have the proper certification. How long have officials known about this, and why has it suddenly become a topic?
So the city said that they found out about this in October when a technician alerted them about the potential problems here with not everyone being certified. What the city has said is that since 2008, this is the process they followed for radar guns. Since 2018 for LiDAR, they think that the speed guns were calibrated properly. They're portraying this as more of a paperwork issue, saying basically, hey, our folks did the work correctly, but they just, didn't have the right paperwork, which they are legally required to have under the state law. So they're assessing how many tickets could be impacted here, but this is a long-running issue. And the city said that 170 out of the 230 speed devices they use had this issue where they were not calibrated by people with the right paperwork.
So city officials have insisted, as you said, that these radar devices were properly set up, but maybe I'm misunderstanding what we're about to hear, but you can explain it to me after we do. The city's chief information officer, Renee Askew, says the problem, that's her word, stretches back for more than a decade.
We must hold ourselves accountable to the fact that we did not adhere to the state requirements. We believe this issue started as an incorrect interpretation of the requirements back in 2008. and has become a standard practice.
So how is it that the city believes everything is fine, but the city information officer apparently has a different opinion? Am I misunderstanding the quote there?
So I think you can think about it as, for example, say you had a home renovation project, an inspector came by, checked it out, said everything's okay, and you found out later that that person was not a licensed home inspector. They might have done the work correctly, they might have correctly assessed your house, but they don't have the certification, they're not a licensed home inspector, you can't take anything they say to the county building department or whatever it might be. So I think that's kind of analogous to where we are now with this situation.
And in any event, the Mecklenburg District Attorney is informing defendants' lawyers about the situation. What impact might that have if these devices have in fact been miscalibrated, and they can prove that?
So they say, the DA's office has said that police have other means. They don't have to have a radar gun reading to give you a speeding ticket. They can estimate your speed visually if they're following you and they know how fast they're going. They can do that. So they can legally issue tickets without these, but it's pretty easy to imagine a situation where if you get a ticket for going 10 miles over the speed limit, and the radar gun reading is thrown out, and all you have is the police officer saying, I think visually he was going 10 miles, it would be pretty easy to, as a lawyer, say, really, 10 miles? You sure it wasn't 8? You sure it wasn't 12? You sure it wasn't 6? And Tony Messia with the Charlotte Ledger had a good interview with George Lauren, kind of a defense lawyer superstar locally, who, basically said defense lawyers and people who do traffic court stuff are salivating over this.
Okay, Shamari, back to the schools for a moment. You reported this week that CMS appears to be suspending black students at a disproportionate rate. What are the numbers?
Well, just over 5,000 students since the school year started have been suspended between when school started in December. So you have about 5,500 students suspended. Of those 5,500 suspended, they say that just about 68% of those are black students, right? But here's the problem. 36% of overall students are black students at CMS. So that's what they call disproportionate. And they want to basically bring the percentage of students and the percentage of what they represent in suspensions the same, because it's disproportionate. So that's where their numbers lie. And they have a goal to reduce it slowly as the years go by. And they've been successful, and they said that they think they're on track based on current numbers.
And I would guess that there are other options in some of these cases to suspension. Why are they choosing suspension?
Yes, and they identified that as a problem. They said there were two problems on why they believe that black students are being suspended at these disproportionate rates. One is that there is not enough viable options for in-school suspension, and so they created these programs to keep the kids in school so that out-of-school suspension is like one of the last steps, because it's really important to keep to school. If you're not in school, well, obviously you can't learn.
Okay. Some good news, bad news. This week, $3.25 billion surplus, Eric. The bad news is that the state has a $3.25 billion surplus. Why the surplus? What does it mean?
The surplus is resulting from a couple things. One is stronger corporate profits, consumer spending still strong, and income tax collections are better than expected. The rub here, Mike, is that this now leads to a fight between the legislature and the governor over what to do with this additional money, and this is a long-running debate.
So traditionally, when we've had a surplus in many states, and including the Congress, Democrats like to take that money and put it in a rainy day fund or find ways to spend it. Republicans say, well, that means taxes are too high and they want to lower taxes. We have a Republican-controlled legislature. What are they likely to do in response to this?
Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, I mean, that's the fight, and that's likely. I think what you'll see is the usual differences of, state employee and teacher raises, reserves, capital spending, and what will happen is the Republicans, who have more power as the legislature than the governor does, will go much lower than what the governor wants, and then they'll either cut taxes and put money in the rainy day fund, or do both.
Staying in Raleigh for a moment, the legislature made two decisions this week, at least to make it easier to override the governor's veto And the Senate made a decision on guns. Let's talk about the vetoes first. Last year, the legislature did not have a supermajority. They couldn't override the governor's veto. This year, they are one vote shy in the House of being able to do that, and they could bring Democrats over, or they could pull a fast one. And that's what they've kind of chosen to do. Talk about that.
Yeah, and of course, Mike, the Democrats say this would be pulling a fast one. The Republicans say, no, we're just, lending a clear process to what we will do. And what it would do is allow the House to vote to override the same day they receive a veto notice, or the same day that the Senate overrides a veto. Currently, you have to have a 2-day notice. And
you ready?
Yeah.
Dang, it's cold, Joe.
Yeah.